The potential for tropical development in our area continues to rise. Your forecast across the Caribbean and the Bahamas starts right now.
This is Meteo Mundo.
Hi friends, Rusty back here at Meteo Mundo. Great to see you on a Sunday. Hope you're doing well. Hope you had a great weekend. Coming up in this video, I've got all the newest information on this potential tropical development area. We'll look at the latest data and model information for you. Talk about some active weather across our region on this Sunday. And then we'll look at the island by island rainfall forecast for you as well. So it's a jam-packed video. You know I love to hear from you guys. Drop it in the comments section below where you're viewing from, what the weather has been like. Really helps out our Meteo Mundo weather community. We'll start the video with what's going on right now with our tropical wave. It's located at this X. The orange area is from the National Hurricane Center, the potential development area, and that's going to be a 40% chance. So potentially steady development here over the next several days. Now, as the crow flies at the hour for us here, if we go from the closest island area of Barbados to that X, we're right around 800 miles off towards the east. But again, slow progressive west-northwest movement is likely. So let's look what's happening here with this tropical wave on this Sunday. This is the infrared satellite imagery, still relatively disorganized. We've had some flare-up of showers and storms here near that wave at the hour, but it's still enveloped in some very dense Saharan dust. That's all the red that you see here on the water vapor imagery, all of this dry air, and you can see how far north and west that Saharan dust and dry air extends. It's really been impacting the Lesser Antilles, the Virgin Islands, and Puerto Rico over the last couple of days with a lot of haze. Now, the axis of thickest dust is moving off towards the west, and as that relaxes and we start to see this moisture field kind of wrap around that wave, that is where we expect to have slow, gradual development of this wave as it moves west-northwest towards the Leeward Islands here by Tuesday and Wednesday, because again, we're in La Nina, we have very high sea surface temperatures and very little wind shear. So as the Saharan dust and the dry air gets pushed to the north and to the west, we should see some gradual development out of this wave, and that's what the Hurricane Center is thinking. Let's take a look at the visible satellite imagery. We'll just take a look at everything we got here at Meteo Mundo. Again, still relatively disorganized. We're right here towards losing the daylight here in the Atlantic, but again, very clear to see. We still have a long way to go as far as any development. I'm going to throw on both the infrared and the visible satellite imagery. Nice clear presentation for us here. And again, a good little blow up of thunderstorms, but it's going to take some time as this moves up towards the west-northwest. And again, we still have a lot of dry air out ahead of it, but that should continue to weaken and disperse over the next several days. So that's why we have our area here. I think it more than likely is not going to develop east of the Leeward Islands. Most of the models have this farther west for potential development, and then we'll talk about the models and the track and the potential intensity as we get deeper into our video. First things first, though, I do want to talk about what's happening on this Sunday. So let's talk about some areas that have had some fairly active weather. We'll start with my friends in the Bahamas. I'm going to take off this area of orange first. Of course, that's just the potential tropical development area. I mentioned in the last couple of videos that today the storms would actually be moving from north to south over the northwest Bahamas, and they're just beginning to take shape here on this late Sunday afternoon. We'll pull on the radar data. I'll drop off the satellite data momentarily, and you can see those showers and storms just beginning to develop over places like Walker's Key, Grand Bahama. It's getting wet right now over Freeport, Lucaya, West End, and High Rock, Abaco area. This will drop south towards Bimini. A few showers and storms developing over Andros at the hour. New Providence will have an opportunity. Same thing for Eleuthera, maybe as far south as Cat Island and Exuma, but certainly our northwest areas. Showers and storms here in the Bahamas will become more widespread. Heavy rain, fair amount of lightning to go along with things, and pretty slow movement of the storm, so locally heavy rainfall will come along for the ride. So just more prolific for today. Go back over to the satellite data for us here. Now we get a little bit farther south into the central and the southeast Bahamas, and will actually be relatively dry for the remainder of this Sunday. Same thing for our friends in the Turks and the Caicos. As of yet, we haven't seen the thunderstorms develop over Cuba, but those in a localized fashion will probably ramp up very late today into the early evening hours. We're high and dry right now in the Cayman Islands. Let's throw on, well, first thing actually is I want to go over to Jamaica real quick. And again, we've been relatively dry here. I'm going to put on the temperatures first, and you can see those in Montego Bay and Kingston, then the feels like numbers, because we haven't had the storms develop yet. So Kingston's feels like temperatures above 110. That's more than 43 degrees Celsius. Still could see some storms getting going here later in the day. What's interesting is we actually have these mid-level winds out of the south and west, which is pulling over Hispaniola, and that's actually brought in a little bit of rain. Now, the Saharan dust is still a factor for us here. Again, these aren't surface winds. The surface winds are still out of the east, but this moisture coming out of the southwest has brought a veil of clouds kind of mixing in with the dust, and we've had a few showers develop. They're not as widespread as this infrared satellite imagery, but you can see the temperature in Santo Domingo has fallen a bit. We've had a few showers down there, trying to eke east towards Punta Cana, trying to move north towards the Samana area as well. So again, the air quality is not fantastic when you have this haze and this mid-level kind of veil of moisture coming back into the area as well. We'll get back off to the east in just a second, but I want to kind of follow this moisture train back into Central America, where again, this is still the wettest part of our area right now. We'll get additional showers and storms in Panama to push inland later in the day. Same thing for Costa Rica, but these storms are really going gangbusters right now off of coastal Nicaragua and Honduras and beginning to work their way inland as well. So widespread showers and storms, flooding rains are possible. You live in this area, let me know. The storms are building north and west into the northern coastline of Honduras, San Pedro Sula, La Chiva, Roatan, all with the opportunity for some storms. Same thing for coastal Guatemala. We've had some storms today in Belize, San Ignacio, Belmopan, Belize City, Chechemal there on the southern sides of Quintana Roo, scattered showers and storms. It's not as prolific again, north and east, Cancun and Cozumel mainly dry, but we'll see some storms work their way back into the northwest sides of the Yucatan as well, Merida, on over towards Campeche. Relatively wet forecast again on this Sunday in this area. It actually will begin to dry out a little bit as we get into our Monday. So back over to this area here. Let me again drop off our tropical development area, and then let's get into what's happening in Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. Now, the dust is still a big factor. We're getting a few storms developing on the western side of the island, and here's the reason why. If I go over to the visible satellite imagery, and again, we're just losing here that last gasp, but you can see the east winds at the surface. And then we have the southwest winds in the mid-levels of the atmosphere, and the convergence of the two is allowing a few storms to develop at the hour. Now, they're not going to be extremely prolific, but we're getting a few because of that convergence. So an opportunity for a few showers in Puerto Rico for today. I think we're going to be dry in the U.S. and British Virgin Islands. You can see that moisture is as far east as Puerto Rico, but has not reached St. Thomas, St. John, and St. Croix. And then when you get into the Lesser Antilles in general, we still have a large concentration of Saharan dust. If I flip back very quickly to the visible satellite imagery, you can almost see just a little bit of that milkiness in the sky there in the viz. That's that Sahara dust that's fairly concentrated in those areas. Now, as far as feels like temperatures go in this region, it is pretty hot for today. 95, 100, 105, even close to 110 from Anguilla, Antigua, Barbuda, St. Kitts and Nevis, South, Dominica, Barbados, Trinidad, and Tobago as well. And certainly the ABC Islands have been very, very hot. So that's kind of what's happening across their area for today. Let's talk about that Saharan dust, because it is going to be a factor for us here. I'm going to take myself off camera. The first thing you'll notice is that Saharan dust is very thick over the greater Antilles right now, moving off towards the west. That's going to even get to Texas and Mexico over the next couple days. But behind it, you notice that the concentration of Saharan dust isn't nearly as prolific. That Saharan dust is not going to be as concentrated. It's going to disperse quicker. And friends, that's what the European model has been picking up on for an uptick in potential tropical development beginning in early August. The Saharan dust, which has really limited the tropical potential over the last couple of weeks here in July, you notice those big bright yellows and oranges as that next plume moves away. Yes, we'll get some Saharan dust to come back into our area, but it's just not going to be as concentrated. And with La Nina in place and these tropical waves coming off the West African coast one after another, again, an uptick in potential development is likely here as we kick off the next month. As we kick off the forecast portion of this video, I appreciate you guys just giving me a really small payback and liking this video right now. If you haven't subscribed to Meteo Mundo, you want your latest forecast across the Caribbean and the Bahamas, and of course these tropical updates across the Atlantic Basin, subscribe right now. I appreciate that. Thank you for sharing with your family and friends, and thank you for finding ways to support me here at Meteo Mundo via our memberships, via the super things, via the description below, the PayPal, the Venmo. Some of you have found out those ways, and I really do appreciate it. Okay, so let's again look at this area. Now, I don't believe, more than likely, we're going to see this thing spin up before it gets into the Leeward Islands. But we will see impacts in the way of some showers and storms here kicking up with the winds Tuesday and Wednesday. More than likely, if this is going to start to wrap up, it's going to happen near or around Puerto Rico, Hispaniola, and the Turks and the Caicos. But from there, we just have to see what's going to happen as far as intensity and track, because the models are still all over the place. And really, friends, that's expected when we don't even have an invest area yet. Again, it's a blessing and a curse to be able to look at all this information so far out ahead in time. But the Hurricane Center does have this broad orange area, which impacts all the areas that I just mentioned, including Jamaica and the Cayman Islands, Cuba, the Bahamas, and Central and South Florida. So let's get into the models. We're going to start off with the European model, okay? Newest run that just came in right before I recorded this video, the 12Z model run on this Sunday. I'm going to take myself off camera real quick. Actually, I'm going to just jump to the side of the screen because, again, we're looking for blues and greens in this pressure anomaly. But I want you to notice that on this deterministic run of the European model, we don't have anything really wrapping up until it gets north of the Bahamas and heads towards the east coast of the United States. But the deterministic model is still relatively weak. We still have some impacts with squally weather and gusty winds, but as far as wrapping up a closed center of circulation on this deterministic model from the European model, it doesn't really happen until maybe it gets close to the Carolina coastline. But again, impacts in those areas. Now the GFS deterministic model, it's the same time frame and it is the same thing that we're looking at, pressure anomalies. First of all, just like the GFS has mainly been doing, it's much farther west than the European model. And we'll pick it up here at the beginning. Watch again these blues near Hispaniola and Cuba and Jamaica and the Cayman Islands, then kind of emerging into the Gulf. There's a mid-level circulation in the northwest side of the Gulf of Mexico. This kind of develops underneath that and then moves inland to the panhandle of Florida. Okay, so we have right now the European model around the Bahamas or east and the GFS model deterministic in the panhandle of Florida. But again, that's just one of the controls, if you will. We have those ensemble products, which when we're talking about a system that hasn't developed yet is probably a better thing to look at. Again, there's 51 ensemble members here of the European and the GFS model. So the more plots that we see, the more the ensemble members are picking up on potential tropical development areas. Now the European model is clustered again through the Turks and the Caicos and the Bahamas or east of the Bahamas and then into the United States as we go over the early part of next week. So this is again late this weekend coming up Saturday. So, we're talking about 6 days out here. Here is Sunday. And then as we get into Monday, so now a full 8 days out and then into early on Tuesday of next week. Once again, we have a pretty good cluster developing here, but I want you to notice for the Turks and the Caicos and the Bahamas, not a lot of strong development until it's north of your area. Then it gets even stronger as it heads up the United States East Coast. That's the ensemble from the European. They are fairly tightly clustered, okay? There's only a couple of them that try and pull it to the Straits of Florida or into the eastern Gulf of Mexico. You can see one right there kind of rogue by itself. The GFS ensemble members, there's not a lot out there, guys. The control is actually one of the strongest ones. And if you notice that the ensemble products are a little bit more in agreement with the European model and taking up the United States East Coast via the Turks, the Caicos, and the Bahamas, but maybe even east of the Northwest Bahamas as well. There is still very little agreement with our global models here, the GFS and the European model. European model continues to have a stronger signal. There's no doubt about it. Now, I can show you the full run here of the reflectivity of the GFS model. So I'm going to do that for you right now. Let's loop this up. And so what obviously we'll be picking up on here, the GFS model, is that track that takes it into the western panhandle of Florida. All right. So first of all, we're just going to kind of take this and stair step it for us here. All right, there's the tropical wave right now. We can see it just kind of meandering about. An axis of moisture will begin to move into the Lesser Antilles in general. The farther south that you live in the Lesser Antilles, the less direct impacts more than likely you're going to have, right? So places like Trinidad and Tobago and Grenada, St. Vincent and the Grenadines and St. Lucia, while you're going to have some showers and storms and squally weather, potentially, you're not going to be directly impacted by where this might be trying to wrap up. But again, as I've mentioned, I think it is probably not going to become a true disturbance or even a depression as it passes the Leeward Islands. More than likely, that's going to happen west of there. But again, squally weather begins to move in Tuesday and Wednesday. Now, as we kind of go off towards the west here, excuse me, a little bit too far out in time here. Let me back up just a little bit here. So again, let's pick this up into early next week. Again, there it is beginning to move in to Puerto Rico, in the Virgin Islands, in Hispaniola on the 1st, which is Thursday, and then working its way off towards the west. Again, we don't have a huge signal here, but we certainly have wet weather, gusty winds that'll be accompanying for that, and we'll take a look at the wind fields as well. Then as we get into the weekend, and I don't know why I went away over there. By the way, there's probably going to be a hurricane in the Eastern Pacific, FYI. You can see this begin to track up towards Florida. So let's loop this up in full time because I'm doing a really bad job otherwise. We'll pick it up here. You can see it begin to develop over the Leeward Islands, Puerto Rico, Hispaniola, and then just kind of wraps up here. But it doesn't actually form a true low-level center of circulation on the GFS until right as we get close to landfall. But again, the GFS has been all over the place with intensity. This is just the latest run, right, to get it into the eastern side of the Gulf of Mexico. If we look at the winds, I'm going to go over to the wind vectors here, okay? Drop off, again, this development area. Let's loop this up, and we'll take a look at that. So this is the GFS wind field. Now, the first thing you're going to notice is the easterlies are going to continue to be very, very strong, okay? Sea conditions are going to be very rough throughout this entire period, especially on the eastern-facing side of the islands, okay? And again, this will take just a second. There's a lot of data here to throw this fully on. But again, strong winds. Purples, pinks are going to be winds of over 20 miles an hour, all right? And if you notice that throughout the Caribbean and portions towards the Turks and the Caicos, we kind of stay with that, right? Regardless of this thing trying to wrap up, but eventually right here is where it begins to move in, all right? So let's pick up the last part of this as it gets into the Gulf of Mexico. And I mean, legitimately, right at the end, there's your spin, guys. Watch it come right up there and spin up. Now I can also bring on the, let's see here, these. It only took five to get it right. These are obviously our counterclockwise winds, and you can see the numbers. Those are going to be your winds. So 25, 30, maybe 35 miles an hour, right? That is tropical depression strength. More than likely not even a tropical storm. So even on the GFS model, which does try to wrap this up as it moves into Florida, the panhandle, as we get into early 2 weeks from now, 9-10 days from now, it's still relatively weak. Could see a surge of wind coming up the west coast of Florida with a south wind with that. But again, this is just one run of the GFS. Now the European model, though, is now 9 for 11 in the last 11 model runs of having something develop. So the signal has been very strong on the European model. It just hasn't been nearly as strong here on the GFS and as consistent as well. Certainly it's been more consistent on the European model overall in time. The next thing I want to show you guys is I want to go back over to here and then bring up our Vorticity product. You guys know I love to show you that. By the way, again, if you haven't hit the like button yet, I appreciate you doing that for me as well. So this is the Vorticity. It's the spin in the atmosphere, right? And you can see again, we'll have broad spin moving through the Northern Caribbean, and then there's that wrap up right at the very end, okay? So again, this isn't exactly surface, but you can see, by the way, is this little mid-level spin. It's very interesting into Louisiana and Texas. It's not going to be anything tropical, but this might try and develop underneath it basically as it moves in, if this solution were to play out. But it's not going to shock me if I see you guys tomorrow and the GFS says something completely different on the deterministic, which is what I'm showing you. Again, the ensemble products are a whole different thing. And again, you notice that even here, we have a little bit of spin kind of coming up as well. So we'll just have to see what the GFS model wants to kind of hold on to for us. But is anything extremely strong with a signal? No. But there it is, clear as day. The other thing I want to mention here while we're on the GFS model is there'll be this wave coming in, which is the potential development area. There's a very elongated broad wave, which will be on the horizon as we get into early to mid the week after, so 9-10 days from now. And yet another prolific wave coming off of the West African coastline in this same time frame. And you can see again, there's even more vorticity and spin with that next one coming in. So that is one reason why things look to be more active. If I get back over here to, and let me just pause that because it looks like we have a bad frame right now. If we get back over to the satellite data, here is the wave that we'll be monitoring for the potential development. This is a very elongated broad wave, which might try and hold together into our area as well. And then here's wave number 3 and wave number 4 just beginning to develop. So you can see, friends, how active of a pattern that this is going to end up being for us here. So back over to the reflectivity, and I'm going to loop that up. Again, for our friends in the Leeward Islands, it's Tuesday, Wednesday. For Puerto Rico, it's kind of like Wednesday, Thursday, same thing for Hispaniola. We'll be a little bit drier in the western side of the Caribbean until we start to see this wave, disturbance, tropical depression, whatever it becomes, moving in late next week. It'll be the same situation for the Bahamas as well, okay? So now we break down the island by island rain chance. So for the northwest and the central and the southeast Bahamas, it's localized storms the next several days. 40% chance for the northwest Bahamas tomorrow and Tuesday, 30% chance on Wednesday, 30% chance for the central and southeast Bahamas and the Turks and the Caicos. Widespread but localized storms for Cuba, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Cayman Islands could see some decent rain chances tomorrow, then drier Tuesday, Wednesday. After a fairly wet last several days in places like Belize and Guatemala and Honduras and Nicaragua, things will begin to dry out a little bit here early next week. Same thing for our friends at Cancun and Cozumel, which have been relatively dry the last several days. Now, when you see these yellow boxes, I have highlighted this because these are the days that I expect these islands to be directly impacted by this tropical wave / disturbance. So for Jamaica, no direct impacts the next 3 days, about a 40% chance for rain. Dominican Republic's chances will begin to improve, but still not even directly impacted by this wave on Wednesday. Puerto Rico, still the dust and the haze in the sky through tomorrow. Improving rain chances for them and the U.S. and British Virgin Islands on Tuesday. And then here comes the wet, squally weather on Wednesday. Bermuda has a decent chance for rain the next couple of days, drier on Wednesday. And Guilip, St. Kitts and Nevis, again, isolated tomorrow. Scattered Tuesday, more direct impacts from this tropical wave on Wednesday. Antigua, Barbuda, we'll see the rain chances improve, especially Tuesday. Direct impacts, again, this does not mean we're talking about a tropical depression, doesn't mean we're talking about a tropical storm. More than likely, this will have yet to develop. But tropical waves bring squally weather, bring gusty winds, bring some heavier rain, kick up the sea conditions. We see this a lot. But this one could be trying to develop over this area, just not fully actually having a true center of circulation as of yet. Guadeloupe, Dominica, Martinique, just a little bit farther south, could start to see more direct impacts late on Tuesday and then throughout Wednesday as well. Again, you get as far south as St. Lucia and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Although the rain chances will improve, I don't expect it to be true direct impacts from this area, as it's going to be a little bit farther to the north. It's the same situation for Barbados. You get down towards Barbados and Grenada and Trinidad and Tobago, and the rain chances are a little bit higher, but again, not nearly as prolific as you get up towards the Leeward Islands. Suriname, Guyana will have decent rain chances through mid next week. Nueva Esparta and the ABC Islands will actually be relatively dry. Now again, we'll be watching for surf and sea conditions to be kicked up as well. Now, this particular model is not based on the European, so you're not going to see that huge, spike in the surf and sea conditions here, the wave heights and the directions in the Turks and Caicos and the Bahamas. But generally speaking, the easterlies will stay aggressive. We'll stay with elevated sea conditions from time to time. Obviously, we'll get some squally weather as well. For our mariners, for our boaters, especially those who are making any of a distance of a trek, please continue to keep in and keep up to date and continue to follow the local marine reports as well, because obviously in this kind of very proactive environment, the sea conditions can change quite quickly, especially with the squalls coming in with this tropical wave. So let's break this down. The overall messaging I want to pass on this Sunday to you right now. Tropical development is still possible. It's at least a 40% chance, and we'll see if that potential improves throughout the week. It is still certainly too early to tell the track, the strength, and the impacts. You just saw how divergent the GFS and the European models are, okay? The Euro continues with that better chance. The GFS is weaker and is kind of all over the place still, okay? Ignore all the other noise. And what I mean by that is if you're on social media and you see one snapshot of one model, okay, don't take it as gospel, okay? Especially if you see something from the HWRF model or the ICON model or the HMON models. Those are true tropical models that need an invest area before they really have a grasp on what's happening. Okay, and maybe we get an invest by tomorrow, but we'll see. But just ignore that other noise, of the one snapshot of one model and thinking that that's exactly what's going to happen. Okay, and it's always a great time to go over hurricane preps, especially if you live in those areas in orange as well. Friends, you can follow me across all social media here at Meteo Mundo, Instagram, TikTok, X, Facebook, myMeteoMundo@gmail.com. If you want to send me a picture or a video. If you have questions about the forecast, drop in the comments section below. I'm happy to answer them. Of course, while you're down there, I really appreciate liking this video and subscribing to Meteo Mundo if you haven't done it. Friends, have a great rest of your Sunday. I'll be back tomorrow with all the latest information on that tropical potential development area and, of course, your local forecast across the Caribbean and the Bahamas right here at Meteo Mundo.